Alright, my Bezos Nooklings. Today we're going to talk about some of the books that I think are worth reading. Now, many of you are going to go, I didn't know you knew how to read. Yeah, it's a big surprise. Late bloomer, I guess. Lots of hooked on phonics, and reading Rainbow finally got me over the hump. And it was quite a challenge because it was, a Sofia Vergara hump. At any rate, this is not all inclusive. I read a lot, but these are some of the core ones that I think are worth investigating if you want to either get a start or fortify your current position. So, with philosophy, Plato's Republic, Aristotle's Politics, Epicurean Ethics, much of anything by Thomas Aquinas is good, and also Martin Luther. Martin Luther's a lot more radical than you think he probably think he was. We think of him as nailing the list of ideas to the church door, but even his political notions were quite ahead of its time. So that's something to look into. Kant, you see some value there. I guess I would say that with philosophers in general, especially as they get more towards our time, I find that their ideas seem to be less applicable and less practical. I'm sure there are people who are going to get on me about that, but it's just something that I've noticed. You have some people who will just be very in your face about it. One of the reasons I like Jack Donovan, he doesn't mince words. It's not a bunch of flowery this, that, or the other. It's just, look, this is the deal that we're facing. This is what we have to be aware of. In that case, The Way of Men and Become a Barbarian, both very good reads for men in general, but also women can gain a lot of value from those different issues. On top of that, I mean, I'm sure some of you are going to go, yo, LOL, but what about Ayn Rand? Ayn Rand has a big popularity following, I guess, because some Soviets told her clean her room, and she said no. And one of them was like, "Why, you pathetic weasel!" And it's a big outrage. I like Ayn Rand to some extent. I don't think that she quite meets the level of the hype. I've read 3 books: Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, Anthem, and Atlas Shrugged. I thought Anthem was the most succinct and effective in terms of a message. People talk about Atlas Shrugged. Oh, it's such a great book. Started reading it, found it very boring, so then I picked it up on audiobook, and it was a little bit better, but it's really long, and the message is overly simple, I would argue. The best part was when the corporate right-wing guy is like funding the liberal dude's causes, which is quite accurate to reality, unfortunately. So she's, good to read. I wouldn't say that be an objectivist fanboy because I don't think there's all that much there beyond some of the more simple messages. Although she is good, and I like seeing her debate the older videos. Moving from that to history, that's obviously a huge topic. I would say this. Going to sources that are primary is really important, particularly if it relates to anything like World War II. Any common narratives, the removal of the Shah of Iran is another one, the fate of people like Pinochet. Going to primary sources, alternative sources is important because what I found with World War II is that almost anything that came out after the war is loaded with bias. I remember one book by this guy, R. B.J. Bosworth, something like that, from Australia, writing about fascist Italy, and he literally said something like, by all accounts, Mussolini could not satisfy his women. And then there's no citation. I was like, okay, that's not biased at all, right? A good book I found to understand the background of World War II was Italian Foreign Policy Under Mussolini by Luigi Villari. That's a very good book. It's limited print. There's also another one, I forget the exact title, but it was by a journalist, and it was written. He was living in Italy at the time when the regime was coming to power, and they give a little bit more honest understandings of why the Axis did certain things, what basically the motivation was in Italy and other countries to pursue certain political ideals. So that's something to check out. Veering into economics, Milton Friedman's good. I prefer Milton Friedman for his debates. He was just like a kind of fun guy to listen to, and from what I've heard of people who've met him, he seemed like quite a nice individual. He wasn't really combative or mean. He was just very laid back and could take apart people's arguments. And then, of course, Mises, probably underappreciated in the West. Interestingly enough, Mises began much of his career, he was an advisor to a fascist government in Austria. A lot of people don't realize this. And it's kind of funny because we've been seeing in the United States a lot of libertarians start moving in the direction of, like, not to say alt-right exactly, but being maybe more realist about the political system. I think that's fascinating because certainly, like, 5, 6 years ago, a lot of libertarians had this kind of pie in the sky idealism, which I think they're coming to realize is not going to work out, at least not under the current, terms of the system. So for Mises, Human Action is a good one, and his book on socialism is excellent. A lot of what he wrote, I think you can get for free online, like the Mises Institute, so that's worth checking out. As to other things on economics, I did read a good amount into social credit. That still appeals to me to some degree. I don't think it's been put into effect quite enough. So that's something. You're going to say, well, what about left-wing economists? I don't know. I can't really get through a Paul Krugman book. It's so boring. But you can maybe find something in Keynes. People are, you got to read the Marx Engels Reader, and you read about Karl Marx. Oh my God, Das Kapital. I think I brought that up before. It's so, like, dense. Every single thing has got so much going on, and I don't know. I don't find it to be very interesting to read. I think communism had a couple of basic ideas, and trying to overhash it just gets to me. It becomes, like I said, very boring. So can't really recommend a lot of left-wing reads. Another one in economics and politics this is good is anything by, like, Herman Hoppe was very interesting. I read that recently, so check that out. Finally, I guess getting into literature, or actually quickly, if you're a Christian especially, check out The Cloud of Unknowing. That's a good book. But yeah, in terms of, like, other, like, literature, like fiction, I think I brought up before Dostoevsky. I love Tolstoy. Tolstoy is very good at capturing human psychology, as is Yukio Mishima. Temple of the Golden Pavilion, probably one of my top 5 favorite books. And other stuff that he wrote, like Spring Snow, Hidden Colors. Almost anything by Mishima is pretty much a guaranteed good read, so I would encourage you to check it out if you have not done so yet. Of course, Orwell. Now, people are going to say, well, Orwell, 1984, and Animal Farm. And I agree with you, but there's other stuff. Burmese Days, Formaggio di Catalonia, and of course, Why I Write, which is more of like a pamphlet, but it's excellent. It's basically one of the greatest indictments of the corruption of the English language. If you look at how most people write columns, and in general their writing style today, he just tears them apart. It's brilliant. It's not very long. I encourage you to check it out, especially if you have any aspirations to be a writer yourself. As for books that I'm not a big fan of, that are maybe overly popularized, Paulo Coelho I find to be an obnoxious bore, and I'm not saying he's a bad writer per se. I liked Manuscript Found in Accra, but that might be because I listened to the audiobook and it was Jeremy Irons doing it. The Alchemist I was not particularly impressed with, and then Gabriel Marker Garcia, Love in the Time of the Kohlrabi. Oh my God, shut the hell up, for the love of Christ.
Hey, we're a bunch of people living in a repressed Catholic society, and we're all having sex with each other, and the women are having sex with the slaves because it's taboo, and they should win a Nobel Peace Prize.
No, I've never understood the appeal of books like that. There's some of these books that are considered like classics, and you read them and say, what was so big about it? It was, I guess, avant-garde because it was talking about the breakdown of civil or acceptable society. I don't know. Also, The Catcher in the Rye. Oh yeah, I'm such a hard ass because I read The Catcher in the Rye. Again, maybe at the time it was more relevant. I've never understood what was so impressive about that book. Maybe I'm missing something. Who knows? Trying to think beyond that. Well, actually, a book that I do like, I read. If you can get a hold of it, rather. L.K. Advani's biography. If you want to know more about Indian culture, Hindu culture, that's very good. The history of India in general. It's an excellent read, and you'll see a lot of the parallels in the early mythology between, like, Christianity and Hinduism, which is quite fascinating. So. That's not going to be all-inclusive. Lots of stuff probably didn't mention, and I'm sure many of you are going to make your contributions. But like I said, reading is important, and not to be a complete bookworm, but constantly building up knowledge and being able to fortify yourself makes you effective, not just in debates, but it also keeps your mind active and challenged. So I highly advise you to uh, at least one book on a consistent basis or more. If you don't want to carry around the paperback, get yourself a cheap Kobo reader or Kindle or no, don't go Kindle, go Nook. You don't give money to Bezos. Uh, just something like that. I encourage you to always be reading, or if you don't really like reading audiobooks, it's a good practice for your mind, and it's something that you're probably not going to regret.